link didn't work, but maybe we could share that in the Hurdy Gurdy community later.
Yeah, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put what I'll likely do, just so everybody here can kind of get what's going on, is I will very likely just put a Dropbox link in for everybody, and maybe we can do a public link, but and see if I can share it on the YouTube stuff. But if not, I'll do a Dropbox link, and then everybody can just access the Dropbox for the music, and I'll try to just throw some, various different people in there so that you kind of have an idea of the sound the instruments can make and the type of music people play on them. So, okay, here we go. All right, so I'm looking at my counter. It's counting away. It's probably a little more pressure than I need. Okay, so we're going to go to maintenance, and the what I want to talk about is all the basic maintenance you need to know. So the basic maintenance starts with the first simple things everybody always says: cotton and rosin. And the cotton and rosin thing is simple. Rosin is a literally a resin from a pine tree that they've added a few extra things to. Sometimes they don't even add extra things to it. They just put resin in there and then heat it up and take out all the bugs and then sell it to you. But what you need to know is that your rosin should be relatively smooth. Like I'd seen somebody said they dropped their rosin on the ground and then they just glued it all back together with alcohol. You can do that. Just stick it all back. Put some alcohol in between the broken pieces and shove it all back together. But try to get it smooth again. Whether you just use it or scrape it on some sandpaper or whatever. Just try to get it so that it's relatively flat. You don't want like a bunch of big chunky bits here and there. So you're going to take the rosin that you have. I'm going to use the stuff I've already got. You're going to take the rosin, and when you crank the wheel, let's say you're playing and you're not getting the response out of it. It's not buzzing, or it's the drones don't come on time. And the way that you can tell whether things work or not and whether you've got enough rosin is if you start playing and it starts sounding, you've got enough rosin. If you start playing and things kind of go and they start building up, then you don't have enough rosin. Add a little rosin. Same thing for the drones. If the drones like are really slow getting started, or they're constantly like fighting you in harmonics, if it's not an adjustment on the drones, it's a little rosin. You just need a little rosin. So in this case, I'm just using this Kaplan rosin that seems to be like perfect for what we need. And all you do, you don't bear down on it. You don't need to bear down on it at all. All you do is just rest the rosin on the wheel and crank and move it back and forth, and you're done. Tekaroos tend to be a little heavy on the rosin side, so they tend to be a little more forgiving, so you can use a little more rosin on it. If you crank and it sounds really scratchy, and it's not adjustment, get back to the adjustment later. It's not adjustment. If it sounds really scratchy, you've got two options, and that is to take a rag. This ends up, I have no idea where this came from, but it works perfectly for me. It's a swaddling cloth that came from someplace, and it's really nice, fairly smooth cotton. It's durable, but it's cotton. That's the important part. Terry cloth doesn't work so well because the fibers tend to like come off and will get on your wheel or your rosin. But any smooth cotton towel, so that it's not. If it's terry, just try to get at the low terry cloth stuff. So if it's making too much noise, you stick your finger in a folded up. By the way, that's all the oil. That's all stain. That won't come off. You stick your finger in the folded up cotton cloth and put your finger on the wheel and push down and crank fast and hard. And you should, if you've got too much rosin, you should end up with these little spots. Little shiny spot of rosin right there. You're just taking off the rosin and smoothing it out. See, somebody uses liquid rosin. Same idea. You're burnishing the wheel. You can put liquid rosin on it and crank, and you're just burnishing the wheel. If you do liquid rosin, you put a couple of drops on just a piece of cotton. The cotton sliver stuff. You make a little cotton ball, put a couple of drops on there, stick it on the wheel, crank, move it back and forth, and then you burnish the wheel after that. You want to make sure it's smooth and that you don't have high spots. Liquid rosin on wooden wheels stands the grain up. It's gonna sound rough, especially if you don't burnish it. And even if you do burnish it, the grain is standing up on the wheel and grabbing the string. And what eventually happens is eventually all the liquid that's built up behind those wooden grains, that goes away, and the grain kind of flattens out and it plays smoothly again. Wooden wheels, if you put liquid rosin on them, they're gonna sound rough to begin with. Just know that. There's nothing you can do about it. Even if you burnish it, if you burnish off too much of it, it's not going to sound, and you're going to put more on, and you're going to take it off, and you put it back. Just know that it's going to sound rough, and it'll probably sound rough for about 20 minutes. Keep playing; it'll go away. Same thing with rosin. If it sounds a little harsh, but it's not bad, go ahead and just keep playing. It will eventually wear its way off. I mean, it comes off as you play because you got to keep putting it back on, so you're just taking off the high spots. Things you don't want is like chunks on the wheel. If it's got like a chunk of rosin that got somehow on the wheel, just grab some really fine sandpaper, 400, 600 grit, put it on the wheel, scrape it, just sand it down a little bit, put rosin on it, burnish it again. You'll be back to normal. You'll be back to playing, no problem. So it just takes a little experience, a little practice, but you'll get it if it happens. So you'll notice that, see how shiny that wheel is? You kind of see it you see the reflection of it. That's the way your wheel should look. If it's a wood wheel, it should look like that. If it's a plastic wheel, it should look like that. If it's, I have a Weichselbaumer that's got this a composite wheel, and it doesn't look like that, but it's just the nature of the material. But it should be shiny. The shiny wheel basically indicates to you that the rosin is flat and burnished. It means it covers the whole surface. It's the finish is good and it works well. So okay, so next thing, cotton. Okay, so cotton is this endless how do I put cotton on thing, and there's a video, because this takes too long to do in reality. There's a video online. Actually, there's several videos online, but the video that I have posted online talks about the way that I do it, and that is I take a little bit of cotton, not a lot. So a lot of beginners start out and they grab a whole big wad of cotton. Don't do that. Just a little thin bit. You're covering a tiny little string. You don't need a whole big bunch of it. It's going to wrap around. It's like if you take a pencil and start wrapping a string around it, eventually you've got this huge thing, out of a string that's not very long. You don't want it. You don't need that. You just need a tiny little bit. And when I say a tiny little bit, it's about the size of a postage stamp. You want it to cover the wheel side to side, except for the wonder string. Or if your instrument is picky about how the cotton works, that's, you need to work on your instrument. So that's the amount of cotton I'm going to put on. Tiny little bit. I'm going to put on this middle string right there. See it? And the way it goes is like this. And it's, like I said, there's a video online that talks about it. And there's several of them. But the way that I put it on, I pinch it like that, use my middle finger, lift up the string that I need to put the cotton on. I missed one step. I'm going to tell you what that really, really, really important step is. Set the cotton aside for a second. The really, really important step, the step that almost everybody who starts out misses, forgets, or doesn't do. You need to put rosin on the string. Cotton is not naturally sticky. It doesn't want to stick anywhere. It wants to slide right off. You need to make it sticky. You need to make the string sticky so that the rosin will stick to it. The way you do that, you take this, so the cotton will stick it. So the way you do that, take a cake. I just use a separate one. Like I've got a different cake of rosin to put string stuff on, but you could use the same one. What you do, find a wound string. This is my wound drone string, and rub it across it. Trying to make a little powder out of that solid block. Always blow off the cotton, or always blow off the rosin. It builds up over time and it sticks, and it's like hours and hours and hours to get it off a finish if you get it on there too thick. Clean off the instrument every time you use it so that you don't have rosin all over it, unless you don't care. You know, plenty of fiddlers have rosin all over their instruments. Others, it's like in pristine condition all the time. So, okay, so rosin on the powdered rosin on the cake. I'm going to lift the string off the wheel. That's important, and go sideways because this is a wound string. I'm going to go sideways across the string. If it was a gut string, if it was a nylon string, or if it was a wound string, you could go back and forth, but or you could use liquid rosin. But in this case, gut string, I want to go sideways across it and make sure that I get the powder on it. You're going to get some on the wheel. Go ahead and blow it off the wheel. Rosin, cotton, middle finger, lift the string up with the middle finger like that. Put the cotton under the wheel, under the string, on the wheel, facing you. So you're going to put it behind the string closest to you. You're going to crank the string, crank the wheel a little bit until you get about half of the cotton under the string. So it's going to look like this with the string sitting on top of it. So it's going to just look like a little C with the string on top of it. I was looking at the camera, not the thing, so I didn't get it right. But anyway, so once you do that, set the string back on it. That part's done. Don't go crazy. That's done. Just get the cotton underneath the string. That's all you need to do. Next, you're gonna want to get the cotton to roll up over the string like this. It's gonna fold up over the string. And the way you do that is you give the wheel a tiny little turn. If you crank it, it's gonna go flying out of there. Don't crank it. Give it a tiny little turn. Then you use the side of your thumb. Try to make sure you don't have, didn't eat nachos and your thumb's all oily. Use the side of your thumb closest to your nail on the back here. And you're going to, from the back side, from the side that's away from you, you're going to comb that cotton over the string towards you. So you're going to comb it over, crank, comb it over, crank, and then just keep doing that. And try not to touch the wheel. And I'm looking at you and when I'm trying to do this and don't have glasses on and all that stuff. So anyway, you can lift it up, fix it, straighten it out, whatever you need to do. Once you get it on there, crank a little more, and then, this is the important part, in order to get it on there tight, push down on both sides of the string, and it'll start binding up. Now, with a gut string, you can grab it, you put the string here, and you pinch the string like this and twist the string, and you're going to twist the string back towards yourself. And you got to kind of grab it like this and then rotate your hand over so the string goes with it. If you can't do that, don't worry. The way that you do that, the way that you accomplish this is just pushing down on both sides, and that'll grab the cotton and pull it back over. Now, this doesn't end up being the cleanest looking if you push down on it, it doesn't end up being the cleanest look. The best way to make it look clean is to rotate it back towards you. I say all that, and now the caveat is gut strings. That's a gut string. Don't do that on a wound string. Don't grab a wound string and twist it back towards you. You can give them maybe a little quarter twist just to kind of get some loose stuff. Don't grab a wound string and twist on it. You'll pop the winding and then the string's no good. Just put the string, the cotton underneath it. Do the same process. Just crank and comb it over the way that I was doing it, and then just push down on both sides. And that sound, that no big deal. You're not hurting anything. Just put some pressure on it and let it go. Okay, so that's how you cotton. Cotton's on, rosin's on. That part's done. Trying to keep it in my time frame here. Okay, so say you want to play the instrument and you realize, I live in Minnesota, and yesterday it was 50% humidity, and today it's 4% humidity, and my whole instrument is no longer in tune. Now, if you're one of those people that likes to play in 4% humidity, this is the way you do that. So adjusting a bridge, the more modern, there's 3 or 4 types of bridge, but in general there's 2 general types. One is adjustable, the other is non-adjustable. Non-adjustable bridge looks like that. It's just a wooden bridge with a couple of slots in it. This one came off an instrument, so it's got a couple extras. But that's what a non-adjustable bridge looks like. So whether it's the different shape or not doesn't matter. It's just a chunk of wood. It's got these slots that the strings sit in. The way that you make adjustments to those, if it's too heavy on the bridge, is you add some little pieces of paper in there. You can use plastic. You can use whatever is going to. I like to use vellum from drum heads, but I ran out. So you use a shim in there to lift the bridge so that you lift the string off of the wheel. Now, it's important to know when you need a shim. So how do you know if you need a shim? Well, the way that you know if you need a shim is if you play your last key. And if your last key isn't quite functional, some of them are not, play the second to last key, and it should sound clear. I mean, it's making a noise. It's not terrible. It's not super scritchy. It plays okay. I'm going to do this with this other string, though, because it's not the one I'm going to be playing later. So let's say, by the way, if I've never, I talk about them all the time. This bridge is made by Boudet. It's got these little individual, I don't think you can see it because the thing's in the way. It's got these little individual bolts that run this, that have a slat above them. The string sits on this little slat, and the bolt allows the bridge independently to move every string. And I think it's a great system. There are other systems that do kind of the same thing, but they use different adjusters. This is by far the easiest and the best one I've had. So that's too much string pressure. Sounds like that. That's terrible. It's just, and that's just way too much. But the way that you can tell that if you've got too much string pressure is to go to the second or last key, and sorry, I got to adjust it so I can get to the sound that I want. Okay, so if you get to that last key and it sounds like, it's a little rough, not too bad. I'll take this off so you can. It's a little rough there, so I'm going to lift it some more. But if you get to the last key and it sounds just like scritchy, like it's not quite, clear, you need to shim it. Or adjust it. And that's the way you tell. The way that you tell a pressure is really just about how it sounds on the upper portion of the key box. If it sounds, terrible from the octave up, or it's just really screechy from the octave up, you need to make an adjustment. You need to lift this string up more. And how that happens is depending on your bridge. This bridge is this boudet bridge that allows you to adjust it. The fixed bridge, you need to put something underneath. And then there's the style that have these little wheel adjusters on them. So I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but there's a little adjustment wheel right in here. And Roboyo uses this little brace, this little section brace in between the two of them, but a lot of people don't. So it'll just have a little wheel in it. The important thing about those wheels, because they're so common now, is that when you make the adjustment with those wheels, what you want to do is you want to take anything that works as a marking spot. So I will often use just a Sharpie pen, and I will put a dot on the top of the wheel where I can see it. So I'm looking at the top, and I put a little dot on the wheel. Like nail polish will work, a tiny little paint pen will work, anything that you can mark the wheel. So when you start adjusting it, you can see how far that dot has moved. Without a reference point on those wheels, you have no idea whether you've lifted it way up or if it's way down. So just pay attention to where you do that, and the best way to do that is just put a little dot on there. So to adjust them, you need to just adjust the bridge so that you've got the spacing you need for the sound that you want. On a bridge that has, I've got another instrument, also not here, made by Kerbouf, and it's got 4 strings on it, but it's got 2 adjusters. You need to know the important part is if you have a bridge like that where it's got multiple strings on it and only 2 adjusters, those adjusters only work for the outside 2 strings. Whether you got 3, 6, 12, 4 strings, whatever, they only work for the outside 2 strings. The middle 2 strings, whether it's 2 or 1 or whatever, those are just like a fixed bridge. You still have to shim them. You still have to put a shim in order to raise it where you want. Because if you lower this side, it lowers the middle. If you raise this side, it raises the middle. It has to be, you have to just think of it as a movable bridge, but only for those 2 points. The center needs to be adjusted by manually, but with shims. Okay. So that's how you adjust the wheel. That's how you adjust the bridge to get the right sound. There's a lot involved in that, but that's the simplest, fastest thing. And I'm 20 minutes in. Okay, so axles. On the axle, everybody's instrument has a different design. This particular axle has a bearing here, and it's got a bearing in the front. It's got little stop points in the middle. So you can't, the bearing has to, the axle has to have a stop on going one direction and a stop going the other direction. So you can't push it and pull it. It's going to be centered in between the 2 bearings that you're using to rotate on. And those little stop points should stop it from moving back and forth. If your axle pops in and out, if you can go click, 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 click on your axle, it's loose. You should be able to tighten it in some way. There should be a way to adjust the axle so that it doesn't move like that. Because every time the axle moves, the wheel moves. And if the wheel moves back and forth along the position on the string, it changes the way that the string can respond marginally. But it also means that while you're playing, it's going to clunk in and clunk out and clunk in and clunk. So just pay attention to the adjustment. The other thing is your axle should not click. You should not be able to grab the axle on the back end and feel it go clunk, 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 clunk. It should barely even tick. I mean, if it doesn't make a noise at all, that's perfect. That's exactly the way you want it. It should not move in any way. The front of the axle should also not move in any way, and the way to tell that is to grab the wheel thusly. Don't put your fingers on the surface. grab it and lift up and down on it. If the lifting up and down on it causes it to go clunk, 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 then the front bearing is bad, or you've got a problem with the adjustment. Just so you know. So those are the axle issues and how those might affect it. So the handle of your instrument, there's all kinds of different shapes of handles. This is off of the Rebollo. This is off of a Boudet. There are different makers that make different styles of knobs that you can put on the axle or on the crank. I may be just running fast, but there's different styles that you can put on the knob. There's also a difference in the length of the crank. So this is an extra long crank made by Wolfgang Weichselbaumer that is longer than a standard crank. Kind of see it there, yeah. So this one is longer than this one, which is a standard Boudet, standard European crank. The Tekeru is going to have a much smaller crank than this. Tekeru is even smaller still. So why do you need a longer one? You need a longer one if you want to do 12 coups, 9 coups, 8. It gives you more room to do what you need to do. Most people get by with just the standard one, is fine. But the thing that you don't want on the handle is you don't want the handle to pull in and out. So if the knob goes in and out, or it goes clunk, 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 it's not adjusted properly. If the handle goes back and forth, like you can grab the knob on it, and you can feel that the knob moves, like that on the shaft, that's bad too. Because first off, it needs to move. It needs to spin freely. It shouldn't stick at any point. You should be able to just do this all day long. If it moves in and out, it's going to affect the way that it plays. But more specifically, the one back and forth movement, that's going to affect how you can play a coup, how you can buzz. And what that means is that when you put all the effort into it to make the thing buzz, most of your beginning effort is just to take up that slack before it hits the point that it can actually buzz. So you don't want your handle to rock back and forth like that. If you have a handle that rocks back and forth like that, speak to a luthier or talk to somebody who can fix it up. Oftentimes, older Alter winds are like that. I don't know if he's doing the repairs on it, but they don't have any bearings in them. They're just a bolt that goes through the handle. And if you tighten the bolt down so that it takes up that slack, it binds, so it doesn't rotate. And if you loosen it up, it starts clacking around again. So it just needs the bearing. The handle just needs proper bearings. Just needs to be made right. So that's what to look at for your handles. Let's see. Okay, and I think we talked about this earlier. Just on your tuning pegs, make sure the tuning pegs are consistent with the way that you understand them. If these all turn to the right and those all turn to the left, that's fine. These all turn to the left on my instrument. However it is that's consistent with your understanding and how it's supposed to be adjusted. If the luthier put them in a very specific way, then they should do that. That's the way you should turn them. But they shouldn't be like randomized. This one turns left, that one turns right, that one over there turns left. Just try to be consistent with it so that when you're adjusting it, it's always an adjustment you're familiar with. Let's see. Sympathetic strings. So sympathetic strings are basically simple pins. They're these little pins on the end. They're oftentimes like harpsichord pins or zither pins or something that are really easily adjustable. They're little tapered, solid pins that go into this wood block here at the end. And when you adjust them, you just need to put that wrench over them and turn them, turn them whichever direction it is to tighten them or loosen them in order to get the sound. Now, once again, tune down, tune flat to pitch, rather than if you go sharp with the same thing applies with the pins. If you go sharp, go down to flat again, and then bring it back up to pitch. Little teeny movements make huge differences in these things. So so you're just going to use your little wrench to adjust them. The tuning for those, ask your luthier. If I'm for this instrument, everything is tuned to D and G. So it's because that's the instrument, the way the instrument likes it. Other instruments I've tuned, I've asked people before, and I said, how do you tune yours? And they're like, oh, I tune it A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It doesn't matter. They're just, whatever tuning you like, whatever tuning you want to put on it, or whatever the tuning the luthier says you should do, because otherwise you can stretch them and pop them. So they're not terrible, they're not horribly expensive, but they are steel strings, and they tend to do things like, fling out and stab you in the hand or something. There's so much involved in this. Okay, we talked about the tirant adjustment. So you can make those. You can make those adjustments. Most of these pegs are like violin pegs. You can pull them out if you need to. But one of the things I want to be specific about on the tirant and about this tirant string. Tirant strings need to grab onto the string. If it's just a loop, like a tied back loop, where it's just if you took the tirant string on, it would just look like a loop, and it goes, and the string goes over the loop, or in between the loop, so that if you need to move the tirant into a different playing position, it's just going to eventually slide back to the position it wants to be. That's not a properly tied tirant. The tirant knot that you want is called it's a modified clove hitch. Essentially, you're going to take the loop, you're going to stick the loop over you can take the tirant string off, you're going to take the loop, stick it over the string, pull it back through itself, and then back in and tie it, so that it's made a little double loop. It's kind of done that with the string, as opposed to just making that loop. That binds it to the string so that you can then move the tirant where you want, and it will stay there. Okay, so I can move it this direction, this tirant string, move that direction, or move it the other direction. About 50%, about the middle between the dog and the tailpiece is where they want to kind of naturally want to be. Some instruments are different, and the response is different in different positions. So just be aware. It's something you want to be familiar with, is how to make that adjustment, or how to knot that over, and then that you can adjust it. It's not fixed. It's not in the position forever. Mess around with it. Move it around so that you can get it in the position you want it to be in for the buzzing you want. Okay, adjusting the nut. Okay, so the nut are these pieces up here. Some of them are screwed down. Some of them slide. These are free sliding. These, I should probably just put this closer. Those are screwed down in place. You can see the screws in there. So those, you just basically loosen the screw, slide it back and forth, and that gives you your adjustment for your nut. Now, the adjustment for the nut is theoretical. I'm going to give you, and I'm going to make it really quick for a really quick example. An octave, the whole total string, the whole total length of the string is, say, I'm going to just give it a theoretical number. It's not true. Is 100? Say 100. We're just going to call it 100. An octave is 50. It's exactly the middle of that string. The next octave, so you've got to 50. The next octave is 75. The next octave after that is 80. No. Oh, I'm doing mental math here. It's just not working. Whatever. It's half of 25. So, yeah, 87.5. So essentially, somebody put it in there. Thanks. Essentially, every octave is half the distance of the preceding octave. So The farther you go up the string, it becomes half and half and half and half and half until eventually it's infinite. You just can't make the octave work anymore. But it's theoretical because strings move kind of based on their own weight, and theoretically the octave should be here, but sometimes it's not. And what that means for hurdy-gurdies is that to adjust the nut, you want to generally get the octave key, the tangents for the octave key, straight to the string, so that they go to when they're hitting the string, they're hitting the string straight, and they're not canted over this way or canted over that way. That's generally what you want. Now you can adjust that. This is not written stone. This is just something that people generally apply. If for some reason it's one way or the other, you can adjust the nut back and forth, the pieces over here, to make that octave line up so that it's straight with the string. And it depends on which direction you move the nut as to which direction you move whether the string whether the octave is high or low as to where you move the nut, whether it's back and forth. You just experiment, see which way it goes, make the adjustments. Little adjustments at the octave at this end tend to not affect the octave so much, so sometimes it's a little more than what you might expect. So not a millimeter, maybe 3 millimeters. So that's the adjustment on the nut. Let's see. Sticking keys. Sticking keys are always going to be a problem because weather changes. The humidity makes them stick. The material the key's made of makes it stick. The expansion of the change in weather makes the keys stick. There's 3 ways to fix the key. First way to do it is to grab the key front and back. So you're going to put your finger over the front of the key here and put your thumb over the back of the key. You can do it with both hands, I suppose. And you're going to pull up, like try to lift the instrument with that key, and then move the key back and forth. And what you're doing is the wood that slot the key is slotted through. What you're doing when you're lifting it up is you're just burnishing the wood. It could be that maybe just the wood has expanded a little bit and there's too much moisture in there and now it's sticking down a little bit. You're just lifting that up and burnishing it, and you do the same. You push down and do the same thing. You don't have to worry about it. It's not going to destroy the key. It shouldn't, you shouldn't have parts flying off. All you're doing is burnishing it top and bottom, and you can do side to side if it works. The second way to do it is to use, I hear graphite all the time. Graphite is fine, but it discolors everything. And once you get it on some of these things, like, onto a key, it's hard to get the discoloration off. And some people don't like that. Graphite works. It's made of, with the normal graphite that you're going to get has clay in it. It's not pure, charcoal type powder. It's got clay in it, and that is how that it acts as kind of an abrasive that allows it to kind of move around and polish the surface. What I tend to use is powdered Teflon. Powdered Teflon is available if you know anybody who does good piano tuning. They will take a big bag of powdered Teflon that's kind of cheesecloth, and they just bang it all over all the moving parts, because the Teflon sits on the surface, and when the parts start moving, the Teflon rubs against each other as opposed to binding up against the wood. So I tend to use powdered Teflon. Don't get it near the wheel. That's the number one warning. I'll use a makeup brush, because makeup brushes are designed to hold powder, whereas paint brushes are not. So I'll use a makeup brush, a small makeup brush, dip it in this stuff, and then wipe it on there. Top, bottom, sides, do front and back. I push the key in from the front, do the back, push the key out, and do the front. And that should hopefully get things moving. The other thing that happens is there are keys that they make that are soft, that may be black, but they're soft wood. They're not these ebony keys. Ebony keys are a rosewood, and they're hard, and you can't, they actually have their own natural oil that tends to live within the wood for 50 years, 100 years. But softer woods will expand. You'll get them to lock in. In those cases, you're going to want to take the tangents out, take the key out, and put it on some sandpaper and sand it down just a little bit. Put it back in, refit it, check it out, take it back out again, and finish it up. 220 to start to a grit, 400 after that, and then 600 if you want to really polish it up. But you don't really need to once it's sanded down. Don't sand it down too much. Light sanding, check, sand again, check, sand again. It's cut once, measure twice, or measure twice, cut once thing. So anyway, yeah, so that's the way that you get your keys from sticking, stop them from sticking. Ultrawind, I don't know if he's changed it. The earlier models of Ultrawinds have painted keys. Paint is a polymer in general, and moisture sits on the surface of it. It does not penetrate it. It sits on the surface of it, and because it sits on the surface of it, if you push it in, the moisture acts as a little sticky surface and stays there. Also, they're not smooth. They're brushed on, and you can see the high and low points on a brush, where the brush has been going over it. Take the key out, sand off those high spots, smooth the key out, put it back in, and try it again. Plastic keys, same thing. Moisture sits on the surface. When you try to get the key to play, the moisture will cause it to stick. You don't want to take those out and sand them up. Graphite or Teflon for those. Teflon probably work absolutely great for plastic keys because it doesn't absorb the water or moisture, but it does keep the contact moving. So it breaks the hydrostatic bond. Okay. There's a long thing about tangents and adjustments, so I'm going to try to make it quick. Tangents for wooden keys, they need to be adjusted by trimming the key down. You could technically put on some the shrink tubing on it if it's too small, and increase the width on it. It's not a terrible thing to do, and you could do it, it'd be fine. But I generally tend to just shave off the longer tangent. So on the Hurdy Gurdy community, we talked about this, where the tangent has to be, the two tangent, especially if you're going to play two tangents at the same time, or two strings at the same time, they have to hit at exactly the same time. And that's because if you don't make a tangent hit at exactly the same time, what happens is the first tangent that may be too long, say, the one that's too long is going to push on the string and bend the string, and that makes the string sharper. So then when the other tangent touches, it touches in tune, but you have to make that one sharper in order to match this one. So that means you have to turn one tangent, towards the wheel, and you have to and leave the other one where it is. So essentially what happens is you end up with these non-matching the tangents that don't hit at the same time, and if they don't hit at the same time, you're always going to be your tangents are always going to be wonky all over the place, how they're lined up. Now, metal tangents are completely different. Metal tangents have the X, Y, and Z axis. You can move them all over the place. They don't have to be. You can move them forward or back, or however you'd like. However, on metal tangents, if you adjust them so that they're all in line, that's fine. They need to be the farthest away from the strings at that point. So this represents, say, metal tangents, and this center line is the line of your resting string. The other one is what's called the excursion of the string, which is the string movement, how far it moves from one side to another when you play it. While it's excited, it's moving back and forth. You don't want your tangents to hit the string while you're while you're cranking. You don't want the string to tap up against the tangents because you're going to get this false sound out of it. You're going to get this like this tinny weird sound. The way to adjust them so that they can follow that excursion is to push the ones that are closest to the nut a little farther forward, and the ones that are closest to the bridge a little farther forward, and the middle ones those are the farthest ones for the excursion. And what that means is that when you're done, and it works, by the way, the same for wood. You can make longer wood tangents. You don't have to. This instrument, they're all the same length. But you can make some longer wood tangents to hit the string a little sooner. And there's a couple things that work towards that, and that is when you adjust them like that, that means that these tangents on your weak finger, your pinky, they play a lot faster. You don't have to push nearly as far. So you're not going 8 millimeters, you're going like 1 millimeter, and you're on the string, and it's like super fast. It's like, the difference between a Toyota and a Ferrari. I mean, you've got the one that drives all the time and it works great, and then you've got the race car, and that's the way that by adjusting the tangents like that, you're making your race car. The way that you want to set those tangents up is simply like this, and that means that I'll show you how that applies. But see that these are all staggered. They're all over the place. None of them are smooth. None of them look like they're all over the place as far as height. And this one's got it's got a curve to it. And the way that you can do that is, the way that you find out whether your tangents are all over the place is tip your instrument back like this. Look at your keys when the tangents are resting on the string. When their tangents are resting on the string, if your key fronts go like that, then you've got all of your adjustment right. If they go like this, then you need to make the adjustment, especially metal tangents. Now, that's because metal tangents allow you to move them back and forth, and you think, oh, this is in the right position, but you want to basically match that. So you're adjusting the metal tangents to play faster and more precisely. So, okay. Tangents are important. They replace your fingers. Your fingers are not going to be on the fretboard or the fingerboard like a violin, and your fingers are not going to be on the fretboard like a violin or like a guitar. And so your tangents need to be they're your direct connection to the string. I mean, you're pushing on the key, but really the tangent is the direct connection to the string. So you got to make sure that your tangents are right. The metal tangents are great for this generally. Wood tangents tend to move all over the place, and they stick. And I've got a bunch of instruments that all have the same the sticky issue, or they don't want to turn, or they break, or you got some problem. Metal tangents give you all this freedom. But what you need to do is, there are some cheap metal tangents out there, and this flat bottom against the key with the post upright is the correct tangent for a metal tangent. This is the correct wood tangent, where it's in straight, everything's parallel, it's good. You don't want this. There are some cheap metal tangents out there that look like this, or they look like that. You don't want that. What that means is, when you push on the string, the tangent will rock. And that means that you've transferred the vibration from the string, where you want to deaden that vibration. You've transferred that vibration to the key, and when you transfer that vibration to the key, and it's not a stable platform because it's moving up and down now, you're going to get all kinds of terrible sounds out of it. It's just you're like, this note always sounds bad. Why does this note always sound bad? It's most likely a tangent. There's two strings, two issues, a string or a tangent. Most likely, if it sounds good when it's open, it's a tangent. And what you're going to find is that these tangents have issues with them, whether they're not flat to the key, one way or the other. If it's a wooden tangent, it may sit like that, or it may be above the key and not resting on the key. The other thing that you'll find is that they're tipped back, or they've got some weird notch in them, or on metal tangents they're tipped back or tipped forward too far. This is correct, and this is correct. If it's any of these other odd options, you need to fix it. Okay, so and like I said, I go on and on about tangents, and I will go on and on about tangents to people that when I talk to them, and that's because, like I said, it replaces your fingers. They are your connection, your direct connection to the string. And if they are not right, they can be terribly wrong. So, and then there's plenty of ways to fix them. Like if those tangents have that curve on them, take them out, put them on sandpaper, sand them down. Just sand the bottom flat, put it back in again, check and see if it makes a noise. Sand it again, check and see if it makes a noise. On the wood tangents, you just carve off some of the parts that are offending and then put it back in. Maybe fine. Or I'll replace them. Okay, real quick, as far as the wheel, and then I'll do some other stuff. I'll talk about the last things. So this is correct. It wants to lay dead flat across the wheel. Sometimes you'll see a little dip on the back side of the wheel. It's okay, as long as it sounds good, while you're playing. This type of wheel where it's coned or it's rounded over the top, domed over the top, you're not gonna get a consistent sound out of that. Also, I mean, this is extreme, but if it's tipped up on one side, or you've got a groove in the middle, or it's tipped on one side or the other, or it's domed, the typical problem you're going to find, especially from a luthier that has just made an instrument and does not flatten the wheel properly, you're going to find this, which is this domed top. And what that means is that when you're trying to play, the cotton wants to only ride in the tiny little space that the wheel sits on. So it's curved like this, and it's going to sit on that tiny little part. When it just sits on that tiny little part of the wheel is responsible for bowing your string. If it has any problems, if there's any issue with it, that little tiny part of the wheel is going to affect the way that your instrument plays. That's why you need a wider surface that's dead flat, that allow the impurities or problems on the wheel to be taken up by other sections of the wheel. Also, the wheel width gives more stability to the instruments. You don't want a big fat wheel because that's not right, but you don't want this tiny little, you don't want to point on the wheel, even though it maybe look like it's flat. You don't want to have this dome where it's only going to play in that tiny little narrow space. So pay attention, and the way you do that, the way you check that, first you can look at the wheel and see if it's domed or not. I looked at the one the other day, and it's flat. It was flat in about 50% of the middle, and then it really tapered off on both sides. So it was optically, it was terribly disillusioning. As far as the illusion of it was terrible in that it looked like it was fully rounded, but it also meant that the wheel that was the proper width is now only 50% of the width. So you want to pay attention to how it sits on the instrument, how the wheel sits, or the string sits on the wheel. And the way to check that is to take the cotton off of one of the melody strings and let it sit on the wheel. If you notice that the wheel does this, the wheel needs to be fixed. If you notice the wheel does that, the wheel needs to be fixed. If it's not dead flat, if it's, like I said, if it sits one side or the other side, the wheel needs to be fixed so that it's flat. So that's the wheel. We're kind of running out of time, but I'm going to do something. I'm going to talk real quick about changing strings. Changing strings is super simple. Super simple. You take the old one out, put the new one in. I mean, it's just that simple. You take the cotton off the string because oftentimes they'll get stuck in the hole. That's about the worst thing you do. You just untwist the thing, pull it out. If it binds up, it's probably because somebody has double wrapped it through the peg. Just inspect the peg and find out, it doesn't come in through the hole twice, or it doesn't have some, it's not crossed over itself. If it doesn't come off, just check the peg. Lift the thing up and look underneath. You pull the string out, all the way out, toss it, do whatever you want to do with it. Put the new one in. Make sure it aligns up with the notches on the bridge and the notch on the nut. Make sure it's not sitting on the string lift or any of the tangents haven't fallen back, so you're not putting it over the top of them. And then put it through the end. Take out some of the slack. You're gonna want a bow that's about that big before you start tightening it. You don't want to try to tighten it from the end because strings are made oftentimes extra long. So you crank and crank and crank and crank and crank and crank, and then you get this big, huge knot of string on the end of your peg. You need 2 windings on your string. I try to put 4. And that's plenty. As long as it goes through the peg hole, or through the hole on the peg, and it binds up, 2 windings is all you technically need, but 4 is better. And the drone strings, definitely you want to keep the windings to no more than 4 because they stack up really fast and then they start overlapping each other and it can become a mess. So you don't need a lot, and you don't need to, it's not that difficult. Pull the old string out, put the new string in, crank it. If it seems like it's got more, loosen it up again, push the string back in again, tighten it back up again, and then just trim off the extra. There's no, the strings are made, like I said, extra long, and you'll see guitar players that have these big coils on the ends of their instruments where they've taken the extra string and wrapped it all up. You see guys that just have them like bunched up. It looks like there's like a vine growing on the end of their instruments. I tend to just trim it off, whatever you prefer. But that's how you do it. It's really simple. Put the cotton back on it, rosin first, put the cotton back on it, then you're ready to go. Okay, questions? Anyone? I gotta lean forward on the chat here.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a good way to stop my tuning peg from slipping?
Oh yes, two ways. I'm guessing it's a wooden peg.
Yes.
Okay, so sometimes what happens with the pegs is that they're drilled a little too low. So when the string comes in, it goes down to where the peg hole is, and then you have to wind it up to where it aligns.
Yep.
You can overcome that by just making sure that when you're twisting it up, you kind of reach underneath there and shove the string up to the point that it wants to line with the hole that it goes through, and then start tightening it. And it'll tighten around the upper portion of the peg as opposed to starting at the bottom and kind of spiraling its way up.
Great.
What happens is when it starts spiraling its way up, as soon as you adjust it, you've made a spring. And it wants to lift. The spring wants to pull the peg up as opposed to pull it down and tightening it. So that's the way that you do that. You just put the string through and then just push up on the string from underneath the peg box and then tighten. Make sure you get a couple of windings all the way up near the top. The other way, if that is not an issue, where it's everything's in line and it twists up properly, violin peg dope. Peg dope is super cheap. It's easy to find, and all it is it's like a wax with clay in it, and all it does is you stick it in, and the clay acts as a kind of a binder and locks it in place. But it's designed specifically to hold it in place, but also be releasable. Like I know we just did it the other day, so we put rosin on the peg. And they push it down in and turn it, and it tightened up and stayed that way. It's because the hole was out of round. It wasn't quite right.
I was wondering about that. Yeah.
Yeah, but you don't want to put rosin on there if you've got a newer instrument and everything's lined properly. You don't want to put rosin on there because it may just stick it in there for the rest of its life. Or you can actually put rosin on, stick it on there, and try to turn it with a turn-a-gauche or something, and just snap the head right off. So.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Yeah. So peg dope is the way to go. Or just like I said, if it's too far down where it comes in too low, just push it through that hole first, and then push up on the string, and then wind it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we got a couple questions in the chat right now.
Yes. I'm trying to go through them fast, but I can't see them fast enough.
Here, I can read them to you too.
Okay, sure.
The next one is, any tips on carving a new dog or Shan?
Oh yeah. Well, it's a whole class in itself. There's a couple of there's a I want to say Tronic or Joe Tronic maybe did a whole thing on how to carve a dog, and it's basically how do you make it in terms of how to shape it and how to get the shape just right. The What really comes down to is just lots of practice. It's basically wood carving, and it's really like the really simple version of it. And I've got what I call the 7-cut dog, which basically means that you take a piece that's already got kind of the taper on it, and then you cut the tail, you cut the cross sections, you cut the little notch out of the bottom, cut the end, and then you trim it up. But when you put the dog on, once you can shape it, put it in, and that's like I said, follow the guy on YouTube. He's got a pretty good example of it. If not, I can email me or send me a text or whatever, and I'll give you all the information. I do this all the time where I send people whole videos on whole video like series. I'm like, okay, do this and then do this, and these are tools you're going to need. But you want to make sure that when you line the dog up, that the dog sits here. Sorry, I got the dog sits there. The wheel or the string sits there, and then it crosses the wheel. And when it crosses the wheel, make sure that without any cotton on the string, that it's level. So you don't want to see the string come over the wheel and then tip down near the dog. What happens is that means there's too much pressure on it, and you're going to get this really kind of crappy response out of the thing. It's just not going to sound good. So it wants to be dead level. And the other thing is, if you put a notch in the dog for the string, if it sits in the wrong way, you can always notch the dog a little deeper. So you just keep putting the notch in just a tiny, tiny little bit, adjusting it, putting another notch in, or putting the notch in a little deeper and adjusting it. Better that than try to put the notch in it and then find out that the string's way off.
This book also has
I'm sorry?
This book also tells you how to make the dog.
Yeah, Desterman Heinemann.
Yeah, it's a really good. I mean, it has a pretty good example in there on how to make it.
Yes, yeah. There's a on Olympic Instruments. They used to have it. I don't know if it's still there. I think their website is still up, and it just says not taking orders. But they've got a lot of, like all of the hurdygurdy.com type stuff. That is this whole compendium of all their information. I think it's still there, and it. Alden at one point in time posted a step-by-step version of how to cut a dog, but I think it's based around the Desterman Heinemann version of it, and then so the general adjustment of them, the general make of them is fairly quick if you're practiced at it. It's the adjustment after that, and the cleaning up the sound and clarifying everything and making it precision and all that. That's what takes a little extra time. But I've done the whole process in like 20 minutes, just start to finish. But I have some pre-cut versions of dogs. So.
Hey Scott.
Yes.
Barnaby Walters has an excellent YouTube video on how to make a dog.
It's Barnaby. It's not Troniker. Yes.
Right,
yes,
and I put the link in the chat.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. That's the one he's got an excellent version of how to do this. So yeah, thank you very much. What else is there?
I think Jody had a question she was going to ask, and then there's a couple from chat.
Okay.
Hi. So yeah, it was just a question again about carving the dog. So with the notch, is there a particular shape, or is a V okay?
Okay, so you want it to be a cutback notch. So let me. Aha. That's not what I want. I want this. Whatever. Okay, so it's kind of sloppy, You want to cut it back like that. So you want to angle this top piece back a little bit, because when the string sits in it and the bridge starts, it wants to lift the bridge up, you want to give it some purchase. If it's just a V, it might want to lift out of the dog and not lift the dog with it.
Okay, yeah, so that's where I've been going wrong.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. And those are actually pretty easy to accomplish. All you have to do is, what I do is I normally mark the top of the dog. I line the string up. I'll put the dog in the bridge. I'll line the string up so it's straight. I'll put a pencil mark in front and in back of it, and then I'll angle cut down, and then angle cut down again, and then rest the string in it, and then adjust it from there. The other thing to remember is that if you do an angle cut where it's a square, there's a V cut that way, the string is going to rest outside that V, that point on the V. So if you do this rounded cut just by using a file or something, if you do a rounded cut, the string will rest all the way against that point. If you don't do that, you just have to be aware that, when you trim it down, it's not going to be exactly where the terminus of that V is.
Perfect, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Sorry, Christopher, go ahead.
I had a quick question. When you're adjusting tangents on the string, if you have the string here and your tangent, you have a wood tangent that goes like this.
Sorry, I can't see you. You're not on my screen.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
If you don't see the video. So you have a string and you have a tangent that you're going back and forth. Pivots, right?
Yep.
You can pivot that helps get it closer, further from the
string.
There we
are. Okay.
Yes. Oh, there we go. So if you have a string here and you're pivoting it, right,
yes,
to match the other tangent, right?
Yes.
It's going to move up and down the string slightly.
Correct.
With respect to distance. Does that matter for the tone that it plays much?
No.
Or?
No. Let me see if so I tune my instruments in just intonation. I use I often use a Pythagorean just intonation, and so I'll tune when I say I use that little tuner, the little Diodario tuner I have, I'll tune the open strings with that, and then when I go back through, I'll use Clear Tune on my phone to get the just intonation. And what just intonation does, there's equal temperament, which is piano temperament, and it's typical for what a lot of modern symphonies and types things use. But just intonation is an intonation that uses the string itself and each note to combine with a drone, which is like all bagpipes are in just intonation. So I use just intonation, and many hurdy-gurdies are set up for equal. And that means that when you make that adjustment on those tangents, there we go. They're going to aim these, different directions. So you're going to have some that are sitting farther back, and some that are farther forward, and some that are dead in line. So that's pretty typical, and it is not an issue as long as when you make the adjustment on the tangent. When you make the adjustment on the tangent, there's a relative arc in which it's going to fall, this way or that way. If it starts getting way over to the side where it's like touching, and every time you push on the key, it flattens the tangent out, that's too far. Thanks. So, and you can adjust those with by moving the nut. Oftentimes the nut will allow you to move that. And just a quick note about how to the adjustments on those. Wolfgang, when I talked to Wolfgang about this, he said the first octave, that is the octave closest to the pegs, to the octave note, is adjusted with the nut. The second octave, that is the octave from the octave key to the bridge, the main bridge, is adjusted by the bridge. So if you've got a bunch of tangents that are all over the place, and you've got a bridge that you can push one way or another slightly, you can adjust the out of positionness of the tangents by tipping the bridge forward or back.
Thanks.
Got more?
Nothing else in chat. Anybody else want to ask out a question before we move on?
Okay, great. Some popped up. Can I play a short?
Tune on the Orbonese DG Unison G Octave 2. Oh, it's RT.
Oh, yes, I will, RT. I will play it in just a minute when we go to the playing things.
Is it safe to steam a bent bridge?
Steam a bent. Oh, I would just remake a new one. You could steam the bridge back into shape again, but it's found that shape because it was probably too thin, and it's decided that that's going to be its new natural now. And if you steam it back into position, it's gonna, because it might have been too thin to begin with because it's bending, which is a problem. It's probably going to continue. It's going to go right back to the way it was. Generally, the thing that you need to do if the bridge is bending, you need to thicken the bridge in some way. So there are some instruments that have very thin bridges, and you'll see them over time. They'll start bending, and sometimes it's bending towards the wheel, and sometimes it's bending towards the tailpiece. I would I would take it off and put a new one down. Have a luthier do it for you. You can reproduce the other bridge too.
Alexa is asking, my Takaro doesn't have a tirant but a wedge. Any tips on adjustment of that wedge?
Yes. Okay. So they are different animals completely. The way that you adjust that, actually RT would probably have a better answer for this, but the way that you adjust that is the little slat that goes in there. You need to pull it out and adjust it back and forth. So it's once again, it's kind of the XYZ axis. You can push it in to add more pressure, and you can go back and forth just like a tirant does. You can move it back and forth to change the response of it. What I discovered when a piece came off of mine and it disappeared, and I was like, what? I don't know what to do now. Is that there's a little block. If you look at where the wedge is for your Tekeru. So you've got your bridge, you've got your wedge, your little stick wedge, and then behind that there's a little lift that kind of tapers down with the string, and the string goes over the lift and then across. It goes to the bridge, and that little slat is between that wedge, or that wedge on this end, and the bridge on the dog on this side. When you stick that little wedge in there, if that little piece that's in the back isn't properly adjusted, it tends to be more difficult to adjust. So just make sure that it should be kind of parallel with the back side of the slot that the wedge goes in. And hold on, let me show you. I got to weed my way through hurdy-gurdies here. Okay. I know everybody wishes they had my problem where I got too many hurdy-gurdies. I might step on one. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. So that little piece right here. On mine, this was loose. So I had to push it back into position because it slid forward, and that affected the overall sound of it. But when you're adjusting it, this little wedge comes out completely. When you put it in, it creates the tension that a tirant would create, and going back and forth changes the response of it. So in and out is pressure, back and forth response, and you just need to mess with it, kind of in and out until you get the right position for how you want to set yours up. Tekerus are kind of different animals, but they're actually great instruments. They're like bomb-proof. You can play them until the end of the world, and they'll still be fine. But that's the way you adjust this. Stay. Okay. All right. Any more questions? Okay, great. We are a little over on our 15 minutes, so we'll stop now, do like a 10-minute break, and we'll come back and I'll just do the last part. We're going to play Cyprus. It's in English. Terrible French. We're going to play that. I'm going to show you the basics of playing it, which I'll demonstrate coups and I'll demonstrate left hand, and then I'll play the tune for you. You can't zoom music very easily, so you can play along if you want to. You don't have to, but the sheet music should have been in with the email that you got for the invite to this. So, okay. See you in a couple of minutes.
You might want to turn off the record.
He's got his headphones off. I don't think he can hear.
I texted him.
There he goes.